The dog doesn't want the silence. I don't want the silence. Nobody wants the silence.
I know you don't like the silence because that's antithetical to your entire personality, isn't it?
When the bad thoughts come.
Keep listening to podcasts, keep listening to music, don't let the thoughts come in.
Never think, never ever think, just consume.
Don't let the sadness come in. Listen to Comic Literate Podcast.
Hey, it's another cold open.
Do you think we can use this for like a Spotify ad? Because they let you you can record an ad and they'll play it.
What?
You pay to have obviously featured on Spotify. But the ad would be us being like, don't let the bad thoughts in. Listen to the Comic Literate Podcast.
Ryan, we've just recorded the ad. Let's go.
And cue
the music. Hello and welcome to the Comic Literate Podcast.
Go on, do it all.
The podcast where my co-host Ryan makes me, a bookish bloke, read...
Book nerd of a bloke.
Makes me, a book nerd of a bloke, read the best, worst, and middest of comic books, and then we talk about it. As always, I'm your host, Jamie, and with me is my co-host, Ryan, otherwise known as Comic Stan.
That'll do. I mean, it's good. It's better than I expected, to be fair. You've exceeded my expectations. And quite luckily, as I mentioned earlier, off air, I'd not quite set up some of the digital stuff preparation as much as I usually do. Yeah. Part of that was not coming up with the descriptive word that I need, so... Oh,
I forgot that.
And then I was looking at the title. By the way, we're doing Phantom Road from Image Comics this week, Eisner nominated comic. Look, in my hustling through my mind, being like, what word can I use? It's like phantoming, phantom-esque,
Phantom Menace, already taken.
Darth Maul, road, warriors, wrestling. Back to wrestling again. So... You've saved me at least having to try and make one that sounded good.
I think that was a serviceable intro.
It was serviceable, yeah. I reminded me of the description for you in the intro because it's a bit wordy. It's a bit much, but you know, a book nerd of a bloke. I did think the other day maybe bibliophile, but there's like I don't want to upset the section of the society who would like burn down a pediatrician's office because they get confused. You know, I think
that suffix has been ruined.
It's been co-opted, unfortunately.
It has, and we need, as a culture, to find a new suffix for every other type of person who likes a thing.
Yes. Because
I consider myself both an audiophile and a bibliophile.
You know what I think should replace it?
What's that?
The one I've used for my own YouTube name, to Stan. So you're a bibliostan.
A bibliostan and an audio stan. I like it.
Because it's got such an interesting, origin of a word?
Yes.
Like, traces back to a song by Eminem featuring Dido, like, and explaining all that. And it fits. Like, it's one of those things that I genuinely like that it's entered the suffix, because entered the lexicon, you know?
Yes.
Because it's not like it's...
You were really proud of lexicon, weren't you?
Pulled that out of my ass. Because the thing about that, I tell you what I hate, and there's...
Also used incorrectly.
Yeah, well... Well, filibuster.
One's personal lexicon.
Nah, well. The vernacular.
Yes, well done. Congratulations.
Yes, pull that one out of my ass. One thing I don't want is common now is people using finna instead of gunna. Have you heard that one?
I have.
I don't like...
I think that's an Americanism, though.
Yeah, but they all spread here, though, don't they?
Well, they do, yeah.
But I don't like it because it doesn't change anything. It's just literally replacing one word for another. Yes. Like, it's not filling any gap. Like, one of the oldest bits of slang that we still use, I think, has to be cool, right? Like, cool has been around for so long.
Cool.
It's just a word now.
Cool is an interesting one because cool originated with the invention of the teenager in the late 50s, early 60s. Yeah. And really, teenagers were a concept that was created by ad men, marketing men, because they needed somebody to market goods and services to, like products to.
I will disagree that I don't think they created. I think they named it. I think they labeled it, and for those services, I think there was a growing difference between like people getting older and the average age of adults was more. And
it is worth noting that there was a growing subset of younger people with access to their own income. And so there was a point in the late 1950s where there were younger people began to have disposable incomes. But really, the idea of the teenager wouldn't have been created had companies not then said, well, we're noticing that younger people have access to all this disposable income that we're not getting, let's start marketing towards them.
I think it is genuinely a bit of a chicken and egg situation.
Yes.
Like they feed each other, and you're not sure which, would they have existed without one or the other. But yeah, that was a fun little trip down lexicon lane, shall we call it?
Lane.
Yeah.
And I think it's really cool that this stan, and we should definitely start using it on the podcast. I think it should become part of the vernacular of the podcast.
Should you make your YouTube name Bibliostan? And then that's like the connection between our separate channels. Yeah.
The network that we're creating.
Stan network.
The Stan network.
Network Stan.
Stan network. Oh my God, it happened live on the podcast. Because
copyright.
Because so many of the words in English come from Shakespeare.
Like, and Eminem is the modern Shakespeare.
Well, in a sense, like he's one of the great poets of his era. And not only is what he does quite transcendent, but it was also not a high art form. It was an art form that was of the people and for the people. And so I think it's only fitting and really cool that something he created makes its way into the vernacular, and there is a hole.
Yeah.
There is an absolute hole in the vernacular where referring to yourself as an audiophile or a bibliophile makes you sound like a fucking nonce, because paedophiles have ruined it for all of us.
Two idiots.
But
we have to cater to the lowest form, don't we?
Well, absolutely, because let's face it, the majority of people are fucking idiots.
Yes.
Like there are very few people that are actually.
And if you think in listening to this, well, these two sound a bit pretentious. Yes, we are
highly pretentious. We are pretentious enough that we think the world needs to hear our opinions about comic books enough that we record them weekly.
We thought the world could do with another podcast, and that especially from us. So,
yeah, absolutely.
That is the highest form of pretentiousness.
So, on to the content. Before
we get on to the content, I did want to make a quick mention to something. Just feel like remiss if I didn't. Unfortunately, and we're late to addressing this because of just how we record and how things happen. But there was a comic book YouTuber by the name of Comicstorian who did recently pass away. So I thought just to make mention of that. Yes, real name Ben Potter, who unfortunately on the 8th of June passed away in an unfortunate car accident, as we later found out. There is a post from his wife on pretty much anywhere to do with comics. He is there. The post is there, like commemorating him. Everyone is talking about like how great of a guy he was and everything. The reason I thought it appropriate to mention it, at least though we are so new to the space, this whole comic book space at all, is I, like a lot of people of this kind of generation of comic book readers, got into comics because of his videos.
Okay.
Specifically because, as Comicstorian, what he would do is he would kind of make moving graphic retellings of comic books using the comic book panels.
Yeah.
So the panels would obviously kind of come across the screen, and he would narrate them and did a really good job of it. And I think he was the gateway to a lot of people's getting into actually reading full comic books themselves, because if you're not, I think most people like me, where that you kind of like, where do I start with comic books?
Yeah.
It's easy to just click on a YouTube video and start there rather than going out,
consume the content.
Yeah, seeking out actual comic books. So in terms of comic books as a whole, and he was, this was mentioned by DC and Marvel, like he's just been acknowledged by the entire industry, because it's one of those things where when people are kind of actively doing stuff, no one says anything because it's just part of the norm, and it's only when people are gone and it's too late, everyone goes, oh yeah, they were a massive part of like everything we do.
So it's a real loss to the community.
It is, yeah. The smallest sliver of silver lining here is apparently they are his wife and everyone he works with, they are going to keep the channel going, mainly because it's in kind of memory to him, it was his proudest achievement, so they want to keep it going in his memory. And it's what he would want, is because he wanted people to get into comic books, and that's what he achieved.
I imagine anybody looking for comic book content would have found him before they found us.
Absolutely.
However, if you found us but not found him, go and support that channel.
If you're the one person who's found us before you found one of the biggest comic book YouTubers going today.
But if you're listening and you've not, and that's not something you're familiar with, go find it, go look it up.
I tell you what I think is more common. Is I think there's people like me who started on his stuff and then moved to comic books. So I think a lot of people will be lapsed fans of his, not because the quality or anything, just purely because you go to the source.
It's the gateway drug to the thing that they're now snorting weekly.
But I think as well his stuff is more. It's definitely for people who, if you can't just pick up the actual full comic book, you just want to check out like what's going on in a story, maybe a run, like an ongoing run that you've dipped out of, and you go, "What's going on in this?" Actually, like he would have the perfect videos to jump back in and be like, "Ooh, is this good again?" Like, let's see what it's like, kind of thing. So yeah, massive condolences and everything, and as I said, just thought it was worth mentioning.
Also, so I also have something. I recently received correspondence from our historical consultant.
Haven't heard from them in a while.
No, and he actually opened the message that said, "I've not had to do this in a while. You've been doing quite well, but I did need to tell you something." And I said, "Okay." Alexander the Great didn't conquer Europe. He did Greece, Turkey, Egypt, Iran, Iraq, kind of Afghanistan, and a bit of India. He basically said that at that point in history, it was really a counterattack for the people trying to invade Macedonia, where he came from. Mm-hmm. And he basically said, why would you turn back to impoverished Europe at that point when everything that was happening that was interesting in the world culturally and intellectually was happening in the East? He did, however, agree with my actual point that the age at which he achieved all this makes the rest of us look bad. So there's some silver lining.
And to be fair, I never disputed like his merits of his achievements, and especially the age he did them at. My just general thinking was, it doesn't affect me because it's so far removed. It's like, it's such an entire world away, several worlds away. There's like, well, that's different metrics. Like it's different. It's like, was it old scoring and new scoring on like sports when they cross a certain point of time? It's like, well, that's the old metrics, There
is a sport whereby an old record will never be beaten now. I think it's javelin, because they used to use a different weight of javelin. And so they've now made it was getting dangerous because the javelins were going so far, the arenas weren't big enough. And so there was a real risk that somebody was going to get speared. For that is what a javelin does. And so they had to reduce the weight of the javelins to make them go less far. But it means that the current world record will never be beaten because the equipment just physically won't go that far anymore.
Yeah.
They had to nerf an entire sport.
I do like, there's a thing recently, and I'm not in sports at all, as you may or may not have inferred from listening to these episodes, but one thing I do like, there's a thing recently there's a debate about, either a debate or something has happened in it, but basically in America, they are, I think, either debating or they're rolling in the stats of baseball players with the stats from black baseball players because they were separate leagues for like a time.
What?
So in but at a certain time in American history, they were in separate leagues. They did not play together.
Segregation got that far?
Yeah.
Well, of course it did, yeah.
And then by a certain point, they then integrated the leagues. But what they're saying, I think from like Babe Ruth's time, who is considered one of the all-time greats, they're like, his records are null and void because he wasn't playing against everyone. So to say he was the best at a time is to ignore the other league that's happening.
All of the black people who were playing.
And I think all they're looking at doing is just combining the stats, like the existing stats. They're not being like who won against who, but it's like how many runs did they score? Those kind of things. And I probably said the language wrong for baseball or whatever, but the phrase I like to sum up was because they were talking about including black players from that time into the league tables or the records or whatever. And someone said, well, we can't really compare them to like Babe Ruth because they never played against them or whatever. And then someone retorted with, well, how can you say the white players were the best because they never played against everyone? Well, they didn't play against the best.
Absolutely.
So it's that just quid pro quo of like, it's either all or nothing. Like that's the only way you could look at it. Anyway, the one time we've ever tangented on sports, let's nip that in the bud and wrap that away.
Because that is not what you guys came here for.
Not at all. And as I sometimes say at the top, but there was a time code if you've jumped to this point to talk about the comic, because the time codes work now. And
they do really well.
A little bit of hacking, a little bit of Mr. Robot, like
hacking.
Yeah.
iRobot with Will Smith.
I wrote the Mr. iRobot.
Mr. iRobot with Will Smith.
With Will Smith. So yeah, Phantom Road, this week's comic, another Eisner Award-winning comic, because we're just fitting them in. I think we were just obviously getting them in while we can before the awards show. I think mainly because what we hadn't thought of, or unless it was just implied, is we can actually choose our own winners before the thing announces. We can say, what would we say we think's going to win?
So what's this up for?
This is for... So Phantom Road is nominated for Best New Series. Now, there are a lot of, award categories. I think we have been mainly just looking at...
What else is in this category?
So in this category is Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees.
Yep.
Is the only other one we've done already. Then there's one called Black Cloak by... Another one by Kelly Thompson. So she's 3 times nominated for Eisners this year.
She's definitely going to get an Eisner.
Yeah, 100%. Local Man, another one from Image, and Phantom Road, and Somna, A Bedtime Story, which I've never heard of the publisher.
It's weird that Beneath the Trees is up for Best New Series, because it's not a series, it's a graphic novel, isn't it? Oh, no, shit, it was a series. Sorry, it was serialized,
Well,
wasn't it?
so here's the thing, because it might keep going, we don't know, but it's compared, there's a separate category, which is Best Limited Series.
Yeah.
So Best Limited Series is meant to be more of a one-off, like limited series is meant to mean that. But the first one there is The Cull, and The Cull ended in a way that was like, maybe something else will happen.
Yeah. So for my money, this was nowhere near as good as Beneath the Trees.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I've got a lot to say about like quality-wise and the larger conversation stuff. But yeah, we will definitely look at hopefully at least one of the Best New Series and kind of decide on like a potential winner for that. But
what we think is,
right now, Beneath the Trees is definitely the lead for that.
So thank you for listening.
So Phantom Road, this one written by Jeff Lemire, a known comic book writer. But you specifically will know him best from the original Old Man Logan. So he wrote that. Everyone else, he's written a lot of other superhero stuff, but for me and a lot of other listeners, he wrote a thing called Black Hammer, which was a very cool alternate superhero like universe.
Talked to me about this.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's kind of feeds into a large conversation we're having later, that I will be having later, about mystery box style fiction and stories, because that one starts off with a Justice League-esque kind of superhero team, or more likely Avengers kind of esque team, who were fighting a big bad. They were going into this big bad fight, like saving the world kind of thing, and it cuts to them in a house in the kind of countryside, just living on a farm, and it's like, what has happened? How have they gotten here? And just like with Phantom Road, it's about the mystery of the story and everything. So he's done this kind of thing before. And just to also mention, Gabriel H. Walta is the artist, and the colorist is Jordie Bellaire.
Cool.
Jordie Bellaire, also the colorist for Birds of Prey that we did last week.
Oh, shit, okay.
So coloring specifically, not
which issue, though? All the issues that we like, the good ones?
All the ones except the one that wasn't.
Yeah. So, starting with the arting.
Yep, starting with the arting. We got to do the theme song, obviously.
I think we can have an episode off from the theme song.
But this is the good theme song. This isn't like the one I did where I rapped for too long.
I feel like...
Do you not have any passion for the Bananas in Pajamas theme?
Having done the theme songs for every episode that we've ever recorded, I just want to try without.
It doesn't compute, though, does it? I mean, theoretically, if we were to do, say, most of the episodes without having done a theme tune, I feel like the pace and the energy would be the same regardless, you know? Theoretically.
Theoretically speaking. Starting with the arting.
No, you gotta do like the rhythm as if you were coming down the stairs as a joyful banana wearing pajamas. And we're starting with the arting, and we're gonna talk about art.
It's like, you've held my hand and taken me down these stairs.
Down the stairs.
You're doing it now.
Like an angry parent in a supermarket that's being stared at by people, because people without kids who don't understand.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. So, starting with the arting.
So it's very reminiscent of The Walking Dead.
Yep, line work, definitely. I think this is I think the line work on The Walking Dead was a bit neater. Like, had a lot more rough lines and sketch kind of look, which I think was intentional.
Oh, yeah. No, it's definitely quite highly stylized. It's definitely, again, I mean, this almost, to me, is starting to read like an Image House style.
A little bit, yeah. But I think there's been better and worse versions of it.
Yes. So do you remember Where the Body Was?
Yes.
That was Image, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
This looks quite similar to that.
Yes, I think this is a lot rougher a look.
It's rougher?
Yeah, with a lot even more muted colors, which I think is contextual. I think it supports the kind of themes of the story.
It has a muted palette, certainly. But no, I mean, the art's perfectly serviceable. I don't have a lot to say about it.
Also, the faces in Where the Body Was were, I think, a little more realistic faces. This is definitely more a cartoon-esque kind of look.
No, so I don't think it's a cartoon. To call something like cartoonized, I think there's a lot of connotations of sort of playfulness and, you know, a cartoonist draws like an exaggerated version of things. I would say it's a more illustrative style.
Yeah, sure. Go with illustrative.
Yeah, it's a more illustrative style.
Yeah.
It's certainly quite drab. It's certainly all quite muted, which is okay because, you know, I mean, parts of it are supposed to look like a post-apocalypse, aren't they?
Yes.
There's not a lot to say about it because it is very much just what I think is becoming the Image House style.
There are some splash panels which are, I don't think, as like visually impressive as other splash panels we've seen. And to be fair, that might be on us to, as readers, being like, oh, normally splash panels are big, vibrant looking colors and stuff. And to be fair, contextually, there is a couple that are like that. There is a couple of splash panels that are a very strong color change to a vibrant neon looking light, which is part of the story. But otherwise, when they're not that, it's just a close-up of a thing just in the same art, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, there's no kind of differences or anything. And again, maybe we're used to splash panels, again, being like, wow, look at that, rather than being like, oh, that's an important part that's just happened.
And I think this is it. Everything's quite understated here. I think the art style encourages you to read it quite closely, as does everything else that's being used in the storytelling here. I didn't dislike it.
Yeah, it was fine.
And this is the problem, isn't it? It's to use the verbiage that we've started to use on this podcast quite a lot. It's a bit mid.
Yes, yeah.
And so there's not a lot to say about it because it is all just quite standard, really.
I think I would have been higher on the art if the content of the story was more interesting. And we're kind of crossing over now into the story talk, but like there was a vibe at the beginning of the art which I was genuinely intrigued by. I was like, what's going to happen?
Something that we've established through multiple readings of different comic books is that you're not particularly focused on art when you're reading comics, are you?
I'm more
so now.
It's more that it supports it or not.
Yeah.
Like, if it goes well, and sometimes there can be great art with not great story, and I'm just like, yeah, it looked really good.
Yeah.
Like, you could take a bit out and put it on your wall and it looked great. But when they work in tandem is the best.
Yes.
And I'm definitely I'm more on the story side than the art side, but when they complement each other is best.
And to be honest with you, the art did complement the story here.
Yes.
Like, it was pulling its weight.
But the story was kind of drab, and that's the problem for me.
Fucking, yeah.
Yeah. I said I had like 2 notes on the art, and that was kind of summed up, basically. So.
Yes.
And it seems like we're already edging into story.
So we need to just get in there.
Yes.
The story's not saying much.
The thing with the story is, it was fine. In terms of a read, like, it was a breeze. I got through 10 issues in 50 minutes. So, like, it was quick to get through because there wasn't a lot of dialogue. There wasn't unnecessary dialogue.
I started yesterday, read 3 issues, got bored, and had to put it down and pick it back up today.
Yeah. I got through it very quickly, but I was getting through it quickly going, what's going on here? Like, I wasn't like, can't wait to see what happens next. It was more like, what's the deal?
I mean, I had a pretty good sense of what was going on.
I got a sense of what was going on in a meta sense, as in, so I mentioned off air, I actually did additional research to try and support what I wanted to say about this. This to me was a very by the numbers mystery boxed story.
Yeah.
So for anyone who doesn't know, and I had to look this up just to confirm like what I was talking about was an existing thing. Mystery box is very much popularized by recent television. Yeah. Some films, but more television.
What's in the box?
Well, not that. That's but kind of inspired, like it kind of relates to that.
I'm just screaming very stale memes at you at this point.
We've done it. I've screamed it as well. I'm just going down this tangent. There's more episodic, more like television kind of episodes. But it's trying to articulate like why I didn't gravitate to this one over others. So for anyone listening, mystery box stories, like most popular ones are, or most well-known ones, are TV shows like Lost is a big one. If you're British, Life on Mars.
Yeah.
The Leftovers. I think of
Life on Mars is a really, really fantastic example here.
Yes.
Because this is trying to do something incredibly similar to it.
Yeah, and that's why it's kind of feeling like its own genre now.
Yeah.
I think you can trace them back to the fandom behind like the Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
Like those episodes, but stretching one concept out over to an entire series.
George R. R. Martin wrote some of the Twilight Zone stuff.
That's surprising.
I don't know if he wrote for it, but he certainly worked on it.
It came out in the 50s, so like it must have been fairly young.
Worked on a reboot in the 80s. Admittedly. So he worked on the 80s reboot. But yeah, George R. R. Martin. No, original Twilight Zone wasn't that early.
50s, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, black and white.
But George R. R. Martin worked on some of the reboot stuff from the 80s.
Right. Well, yeah, nothing holds a candle to the original stuff. Like that was genuinely like there's some very smart storytelling in that first series.
The monster on the plane was really cool.
Yeah, that's obviously a big classic. There's one I remember. This is a huge tangent, but there's one bit of writing, like fiction writing and fantastical fiction writing, which is our bread and butter here when we're mainly talking about superheroes. That I was like, there was something that I'd always thought about with this kind of stuff. And I saw it in a Twilight Zone episode from the 50s. And I went, that's so smart. No one's done that since. And what it is, and it sounds like a really benign thing, when you have fantastical stuff with the element of telepathy or mind reading, right? Which, again, superhero stuff, rife in it, right?
With it.
There's a thing in there where this guy somehow develops the ability to read people's minds.
Yeah.
And at one point, he's in a bank and he hears someone else in the bank thinking about how they're going to rob the bank.
Yeah.
So he goes, bloody hell, I better do something about this. So the guy's literally thinking like, I'm going to put this gun in my jacket. I'm going to tell everyone to freeze. I'm going to make them give me the money, like that kind of thing. Really unassuming guy. And he goes to the security. He's like, that guy's going to rob the bank and he's got a gun in his jacket. So the guards go over to him. So, do you mind if we just search you for a second? And he's like, yeah, sure. Pat him down. Nothing on him. And the guy's like, what the fuck? Like, what's happening here? And then he speaks to the guy. He's like, I know this is going to sound really weird, but like, were you going to rob the bank? Or were you thinking about robbing the bank? It was just
his inner fantasy.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that I thought about before I saw this, because it's one of those big things that in fiction, people reading minds, it's always, they're thinking their truth. They're always thinking like, they're not lying, they're just truth, like what's happening, the secret they're holding, whatever.
9 times out of 10, a human being at rest is just exploring their imagination.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was a thing that I thought Twilight Zone was like so progressive in a lot of ways. It just in terms of like storytelling and like thinking about the world and like incorporating it into fiction that's still most other people are behind in some ways, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And I suppose TV back then was a bit less tropey. Because I
think Twilight Zone created the tropes.
Well, this is what I was about to say. Is that actually when you look at the genesis of any medium, that's where the tropes that then get played out across that medium for literally generations come from, right?
Yeah. The Futurama parody of us, we're now entering the scary door, and one of the funniest like Twilight Zone jokes is. It's just so good. It was that the guy in the lab is like, I'm combining the DNA from the most evil animals to create the evilest animal. Puts them all in, puts in a big thing, like all the smoke, door opens, and a naked guy steps goes, turns out it's man, and it just ends. I thought that was like if you're a fan of Twilight Zone, like that's like sums up perfectly. Like that's parody and homage, like in one.
But no, so this story, it's.
Before we go any further, we're probably going to go straight into spoilers because this is a spoil. I think this is like a plot reveal every issue kind of thing. Yeah. Like to talk about any of it is going to be spoiling the plot. Yeah. So we're saying very mystery heavy centered. Ultimately, I think it's a bit weak on the actual plot and story and stuff. Recommendation if you want to go read it or not, but there you go. So you're basically going to get into the story for now, or parts of the story.
Yeah, I think the issue at the core of it for me is that we have these 3 central characters. So we've got Dom.
Yeah.
And then we've got, who's the person he's traveling with?
Birdie.
And then there's the Secret Service agent.
Can't remember their name. FBI person.
Yeah, the FBI agent.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, she's the only one that I was compelled to care about on any level. I quite liked her. I thought her subplot was more interesting than everything else. But the main plot is centered around Dom and Birdie.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, neither of them are particularly well-drawn characters. They're not particularly fleshed out. So Dom has family issues.
Yep.
And then son potentially dead.
Yeah, it's implied, isn't it?
There's a quiet implication that son is dead, wife is no more part of his life. And that's all meted out at a relatively good pace over maybe 5 or 6 issues. But it's also paint by numbers.
Yes.
And his character, there's this quiet stoicism about him, which is fine, but it makes him feel like every sort of action anti-hero in a post-apocalypse I've ever read.
Yep.
There's nothing to distinguish him. There's nothing to really let him in. And then we see these moments where he interacts with Birdie, but to be honest with you, their interactions don't really reveal anything. I think the character revelations happen at a good pace, and this has all of the elements of something I would enjoy, but there's just so little to relate to in either of the characters. I don't care about them.
So Dom and Birdie's whole thing as characters is to be main characters who are experiencing the big mystery while also having tragic backstories that are slowly revealed over time.
And
that
her
is it,
fiance dies right at the start of the story, doesn't he?
That's what we're told at first, and then, as I said, getting to the spoilers, it's revealed in quite a subtle, actually good way that I thought was good, that he's not the fiance. They met at a stop before.
Right.
I think she was just hitchhiking with him. So that's revealed in like the FBI part where...
Oh, yeah, of course it is. Yeah.
They're talking... The FBI agent lady is talking to the deputy sheriff guy, Deputy Dewey from Scary Movie, basically. And they talk about this woman they found on the cameras, and he's like, oh yeah, she approached this guy at the diner, and then they got into a car together.
Yes.
So it reveals in quite a naturalistic way that she was lying. So that was pretty good.
And this is my issue with this thing, is that the story is really well told. It's doing a bunch of things that I generally really, really like. And so we're not getting this consistent interior monologue from any of our protagonists.
Yeah.
They're not really telling us things, they're showing us things. The story is all being meted out at a fantastic pace. They're using really good, interesting storytelling devices. The plot is fairly neat and tidy and tight. The problem is the characters haven't landed for me. And again, with any story, it's the human element that brings us in.
Yes.
And I'm not interested by any of these characters.
Yeah, that is at the core the biggest fault of it. And the problem is it's one of those faults that everything else kind of relies on. Like, it's the most important aspect, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's hard for me to care about a mystery that's being played out through character interactions between characters I don't care about.
And just to put you on the spot a little bit, what would you describe the mystery as being? Because we haven't touched on that at all, which is kind of goes to show how unimportant it kind of seems.
So they're in and out of an alternate universe, and they've got an egg in the back of a truck that they need to get somewhere.
Yeah, basically. And it has some kind of connection with the road and truck stops, and there's and a larger conspiracy, and all that stuff for me is as you said, it's paint by numbers mystery box storytelling. Yeah,
and it's, again, I don't want this, because the way we're talking about it does make it feel to me now in the moment recording with you that maybe I just didn't give this enough attention and some of the subtleties passed me by.
But that's the problem, is you have to be engaged to see the subtleties. And part of being engaged is being invested in the characters. And if you've hit the nail on the head for me, like, I didn't care what happened to the characters. And therefore, when there's a new reveal of like another thing, like, when the first, these monsters that are monsters, but they're not, they seem like people, but they're withered and aged, and, they're kind of zombies, but not really. When they appear and stuff, if you care about the characters, then you're like, what are these zombies going to do? But for me, I'm just looking at it in the uninvested way of going, what are these things?
Yes.
Not what will they do to the characters, just, what are they? Are they people that have been trapped in the dimension? And there's that kind of stuff. I'm very loosely kind of theorizing. And that's what this kind of show, mystery box shows especially, want.
Yeah.
They want you, and especially TV shows now, they want fans online to theorize and debate and try and predict what's the reveal and that kind of stuff.
They're trying to create the same very voluble, active fan base that something like Five Nights at Freddy's has.
Yes.
And this reminded me of Five Nights at Freddy's.
Just because it had a bear mascot in it.
Well, no, it's just that kind of element of conspiracy where everything's a bit neat and tidy. The Billy Bear reveal, so the truck stops that seem to be the gateway between these two parallel universes, dimensions, whatever you want to call them.
That was an interesting reveal, because I was like, that's unusual. Normally it's like, there's a magic stone, or it's the egg thing. It's just that altogether.
But yeah, so the Billy Bear truck stops specifically act as like a dimensional gate.
Yeah.
In the story, and there is a point where we see Billy Bear.
Yeah, he turns up at the end, and it's just like, hey, and you do go, what the fuck is that? Like, what is happening here? I would definitely more closely relate it to, again, like your Life on Mars and your Lost.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's kind of also more specifically, it's very close thematically to The Cull, in the sense of people find themselves in a new world kind of thing. And The Cull was far more engaging because you were given most of issue 1 to get to know the characters, what's happening in their personal lives, the tensions that are simmering underneath, the relationships between the different characters, and then you put them in this new Narnia-esque world, and you go, what is this new landscape going to do for these existing character relationships and dynamics?
But those characters were more distinctly drawn.
Yes.
And there was a bigger ensemble.
And they had personalities to just flesh out.
They had personalities. There was a bigger ensemble. And so I think there was more to sink your teeth into. This is quite claustrophobic, I think, in terms of like the interpersonal relationships were shown. But that just lands better, doesn't it?
Yes.
This doesn't land as well. And I think
this is more focused on the story than is the characters.
Yeah, and it's interesting because that kind of going into a new dimension trope, that idea in fantasy, really kind of stems from C.S. Lewis's work.
Oh, yeah, the original, the Narnia. It's what we said about the Cull. Like, it is Narnia.
It's Narnia. And
this is dark Narnia.
Well, and this is it, isn't it? But I think what made Narnia so potent is that it was really a reflection on post-war Britain. That's what made it so potent. It was C.S. Lewis's rumination on the place of religion in the modern world, and also his ruminations on post-war Britain and the way that the world had changed thanks to the wars. Whereas there's
also a lot of biblical allegory stuff in there as well.
That's why I said it was his rumination on religion. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, but specifically Christianity, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And you know, C.S. Lewis was known to be a Christian, but also known to be somebody who had really questioned his faith. And Narnia was a big part of that. And so, and you know, he was writing that at a time when the role of religion in British society was changing. Divorce was becoming more permissible. Like the role of the church in British culture was changing massively at the time he was writing Narnia. You know, it's part of what fed into Tolkien's work as well. And so, you know, those kind of particularly that fantasy was rife with ruminations on the world that we were living in at the time. And I think it made it so powerful and potent because it was aimed at children, but parents could read it to their children at bedtime and think, wow, fuck, I'm getting something out of this. Whereas I'm looking at this and it's as you say, it's mystery for mystery's sake. So we're invited to engage in this sort of fantasy world, this alternate world, this, you know, road that goes somewhere. But I don't know that it's saying anything that interesting to me.
No. And it's also, unfortunately, it's very bold-facedly dishing out bits of information at a time, which is how you do that kind of thing. But that's kind of all it's doing. All it's doing is, ooh, here's another little bit, here's a tidbit of information. Oh, this might be a connection. And
again, I keep saying this. It's a subpar story that's been really well told.
Yes. And I think what's important to mention here is, or that I want to point out, Jeff Lemire, who wrote this, is a good writer. Like, I've written great stuff by him. And I think he has those tools and techniques that he's just developed over time to write good stuff. This, to me, I think is just uninspired.
Yeah, and it's abundantly clear that this was written by a really excellent writer because he doesn't fall into any of the faux pas that we identify with bad comics. And he's not making use of any of those really lazy techniques that comic book writers in the big two will often use to prop up a story.
Yeah.
And so, as I mentioned earlier, we're not getting a lot of expositional content here.
And to be fair, you don't need much for this because it is very much a visual.
Well,
where are they?
Any exposition would ruin the story because the whole idea of it is the mystery.
Yes, no, but then on the flip side, one of my bugbears with this is you have a character who seems to know what's going on.
Yes,
but literally says, "I can't tell you that yet." And that's when I was like,
are we talking the dude in the Hawaiian shirt?
Yeah, so he's a guy in a Hawaiian shirt who basically is the only other person these two characters find in this alternate dimension at one of the truck stops.
Yeah.
And he's like, he's another mystery because who is he? Why does he know about this? That kind of stuff. And that implicit mystery is good. Like that's stuff that you just infer just by their existence. But when he obviously knows everything and they go, "Hey, where are we? What's going on?" He goes, "Well, I can't tell you that yet." That's when I'm like, that's very bold-faced hiding the truth from the reader.
Absolutely.
You know?
And also the moment where we see him turn up in the real world and he's there in the offices of the FBI or whoever that secret, policing organization is.
FBI.
It's kind of like, yeah, of course he's there.
Yeah.
Of course this is a conspiracy.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is there's a moment where the FBI agent woman gets captured and interrogated.
Yes.
And then let go when she seemingly doesn't know anything about, what's going on. But
Project Jackknife.
Project Jackknife. And that in itself is very stereotypical. There's a mystery and a big conspiracy in the background as well.
Do you know about the actual event in American history that informs a lot of that kind of content and those ideas in content?
Manhattan Project?
No, better than the Manhattan Project. MKUltra.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know about MKUltra?
Yeah, LSD, mind control,
so
all that.
For the listener...
Men who stare at goats.
Yes, so for the listener who doesn't know about it, MKUltra was a program started in the 1960s in America to create super soldiers. And it did a whole bunch of things, and there were a whole bunch of people involved in it. Part of it was giving acid to people because they thought it would enlighten them.
Apparently, the CIA used to prank each other by dosing each other with acid.
Totally, yeah. And then the other part of it is that they were trying to create non-violent techniques for war. And this dude had the idea of these soldiers who would come in with like speakers playing soothing music, and they would have lambs and gifts, and it was this whole thing. And his ideas got morphed into the ultimate expression of these ideas of non-violent warfare became the Iraqi fellas and the Afghani fellas in storage units being tortured with the Barney.
Guantanamo.
No.
Guantanamo Bay?
No. In Iraq and Afghanistan,
right? Oh,
they
right.
used to get storage containers, fill them full of insurgents or alleged insurgents, and just blast the Barney theme tune at them 24 hours a day until they lost their marbles. And that was the ultimate expression of non-violent warfare. And MKUltra kind of is like it sowed the seed for stuff like the X-Men. Like the idea of enhanced soldiers is really linked to it. Stranger Things. It's heavily implied in Stranger Things that Eleven gets her power because her mum was an MKUltra test suspect.
Yep.
And so it's that trope again, isn't it? We're seeing and when I was reading it, I was like, right, it's an MKUltra style conspiracy.
I think it as a trope, I think the function of it essentially is there's another mystery. The conspiracy itself is a mystery, and then it implies it's kind of like, and it goes really far, how this thing goes all the way to the top, kind of. That's it, really, isn't it? Like guys in suits, like Men in Black, that whole thing. It's like, oh my god, not only is there a mystery thing, a fantastical mystery thing, but there's a secret government part that knows about it.
And again, do you not think that this is uniquely American?
I think, it's definitely come from America.
I think this really has its roots in the same mistrust of their own government that leads the Americans not to overthrow the Second Amendment. It's that idea that the government is doing shady shit and we know they are. And so we need to be extra vigilant because they're always at the bottom of every conspiracy is our own government, right?
Whereas
that is such an American ideal.
Which is somewhat earned, as you literally said, by MKUltra, isn't it?
I mean, MKUltra, the CIA flooding American communities with crack in the 80s. The American government's been at it for years.
Whereas in England, I don't know about other countries, but in England especially, I think we're more leaning on the side of not corruption, but ineptitude.
It's really interesting with our government. It's like, why attribute to malice that which can be explained by stupidity?
Yes, exactly. And maybe that's being an older country. Like, same stuff is probably happening. Maybe the British government has got the same money as like the American government, but every country is doing it as its intelligence. So we've got MI6 and all that. So that stuff's probably happening.
Yeah.
But we're just kind of like, I think we kind of look at people more human, whereas conspiracy theories inherently require the world to be more organized and competent than it is.
Yes,
like that's
I
the problem.
agree with you.
The whole thing with the moon landing and and the 9/11 conspiracy and everything like that is the idea of the conspiracy is a bunch of people are working in tandem to keep one of the biggest secrets in human history secret, and no one's letting out.
You know that one person will have gotten skinned and sold their story by now.
Well, also it's that thing of how do you keep a secret between 3 people and kill one of them?
Yeah.
Like, that's the only way, isn't it? Like, because otherwise it's any more than 2 people. If someone tells, you know who it was.
Yes.
If it wasn't you, it was the other person. And then as soon as it's 3 people, then it immediately becomes muddy of like, well, who told kind of thing. So yeah, I think you're onto something there. It's definitely an American feeling trope, which has kind of become global now, hasn't it?
Well, because of the Americanization of global culture.
Yes.
It's because of the steady dissemination of American media throughout the world.
There is something kind of interesting here. Maybe this was intentional, and maybe I didn't kind of see, was it for the forest for the trees kind of thing. There is a thematic link with the conspiracy of like American government and the American long haul trucking kind of vibe, because that's uniquely American as well. Like, not many places have long stretches of like Western civilization road going through long bits of nothing.
Well, no,
in the
let's
area.
be frank here. Most countries that are the same size of America have figured out that it's way more efficient and cost effective to transport goods by rail.
Yeah, but don't they also...
It's just that Americans don't really have a rail network.
I mean, they kind of do. That. It's more prominent in the East than the West, isn't it?
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely, because the East was populated and built first. But you look at India. Yeah. India's a massive fucking country, and they move most of their shit around by train.
But does
Indians love their railways, though?
Yes.
they love them.
Hanging off trains. Is there anything to say where there's countries either have completely inhospitable deserts, or terrain that you couldn't drive on at all, and then everywhere just kind of being fine, like driving wise. America has that, like those long stretches of deserts, but they're not deserts like Sahara deserts where it's like sand. They're just deserts like there's nothing here except cactuses. But you could pave a road and, railway tracks or whatever.
Yeah.
They were getting into geography a bit too much, but...
Well, I mean, it's because it's not that much interesting in the comic book.
I have some notes, like I've got... Because again, like you kind of nailed earlier, the inherent story, the core story is not that interesting, but there's a lot of like good writing techniques kind of in and around it.
Again, it's fantastically written. Like I enjoyed...
Sorry, go on.
I think enjoyed is a strong word. But I can respect the way the story was meted out.
Yeah.
I can respect the pace at which these revelations come, and just the story beats themselves.
It was paced well.
It was paced well. It was paced very well. And if there had been a more interesting story that was presented in this way, this would have been one of my contenders for the best comic book of the year.
Yeah. I think the best way to describe this for me is it's one of the best written comics that I don't like.
Yeah, totally.
It didn't hook me.
And again, I think what Ryan and I are saying right now is that it's worth a read, because if you like the story, this is really going to land for you. Because if you're invested in this story, those story beats are going to punch at exactly the right moment.
If you love a good mystery story, so specifically if you love Lost despite its loose ending, or if you love Life on Mars, because that didn't really definitively end.
No.
The Leftovers apparently is very good.
I really liked Life on Mars, though, but I watched Life on Mars when I was younger, and so it was probably my first experience of a story like this.
Life on Mars was good. Like I enjoyed it when I originally saw it, but I think it, like Lost, regardless of how you felt about the core show, the lack of a solid ending. Life on Mars had an ending for its character in a way, but didn't explain anything. Like that's the point is, these kind of shows, that it hinges on with a mystery, what's going on.
Yeah.
And if you don't explain it, like Lost and Life on Mars didn't.
Oh, I thought Lost did. I thought Lost had a...
Lost was like, they're probably in limbo. Like, that was kind of... But it
Right.
didn't really... And apparently it lasted longer than it should have. So apparently it had some extra... I didn't watch Lost, so I don't know. I'm going by second-hand
I know that
information.
Hurley stayed, didn't he? That's all I know about Lost.
I don't even know that. But all I know is a common conception of it, the response to it was that it went on longer than it should have because it was successful. So the studio channel, whoever, wanted
Kept
more
it going.
Yeah, wanted more out of it. And then by the time they got to the ending, it was kind of like, well, you've meandered for too long, and now this all feels loose. Like,
yeah.
And again, when you have a thing where the premise of a show is what's going on, what's happening, that's the mystery. When you end it on more of a thematical resolution rather than a literal revealing the mystery resolution, I think you can leave a bad taste in people's mouths for that. And I think that's why Lost and Life on Mars and other shows like that have influenced the genre, but people are redoing them. Like the guy who made Lost, the showrunner, Damon Lindelof, I think his name is.
Mm-hmm.
He made, I think it was The Leftovers after that, which again, that has the premise of that, and again, I haven't seen it, but the premise of it is, I think the rapture happens at the beginning, and the people left over on Earth are like, what the fuck, we didn't get to heaven, like half the population's gone or whatever percentage. So it starts on that, like what happened, but I think very quickly it's like, you know what happened, like it's a rapture. So it focused more than on the human element, and that's apparently why it's so good.
And that's what's powerful, isn't it, in storytelling?
And another one he did, which again sets up a bunch of mysteries, was his Watchmen TV show.
Oh, I've heard about this.
And I thought it was really good. I think it's not controversial, but I think there's a lot of differing opinions about how it's received. But the thing about that, again, is sets up a lot of mysteries within the universe, because there's a bunch of characters but you're like, what's going on with them? Yeah. Like, first episode of the Watchmen show, Ozymandias is on...
Ozymandias.
They say Ozymandias.
Oh, do they?
Well, yeah, because I think it's Americanized. But he is in a manor with a butler and a maid servant, and he's just chilling in this manor, right? But as it progresses, it gets a little weirder and a little weirder.
Right, okay.
So initially you're like, oh, I wonder where he is. Like, I wonder where he is relative to everyone else, because he's not in a city or anything. He looks like he's maybe in England, rural England. Why is he there? That kind of stuff.
And
then as it goes on, you go, is he on Earth? Like, it slowly builds up. You're like, what is happening? Who are these? What's going on? And then it explains it all by the end. So that, I think Damon Lindelof learned from Lost, where he was like, if you set up a mystery, you gotta explain what the fuck is going on. Yeah. While also having characters to invest in and everything as well.
Yeah, and again, I think if you are a particular fan of this genre,
this is a good one.
Yeah, I mean, it's a relatively good representation thereof. But for the average casual comic book reader, I don't know that I think this is a big swing and a miss, unfortunately.
Actually, I take back what I said. I think if you like this kind of story, this mystery-based thing, this is not a good one.
Really? Why?
Because, like we said, all those other good ones had characters you invested in. Like, another prime example, mystery box TV show, Stranger Things.
Yes.
First series of Stranger Things, no one knew what was going on. Like,
it was fantastic,
exactly,
wasn't it?
because these kids were playing D&D, and one of their friends goes missing, and that you feel that that's a very real reality thing.
Yeah.
Of a child going missing, and then the fantastical element kind of slowly creeps in.
Yeah.
But something's weird going on, because it gives you those breadcrumbs right at the beginning.
Yeah.
In and amongst, like, the first episode of Stranger Things, is kid goes missing at the end, and there's lights flickering, like that, and a mysterious girl with a shaved head appears. Like, that's it's mysterious, but it's not fantastical really. But it gives you just enough to go, there's a lot more fantastical stuff coming up. Don't you worry.
I was really late to the party with Stranger Things, but it was really defining of that era of the late sort of 2010s, wasn't it?
Yes. Definitely, yeah. And again, that kind of mystery box stuff, but you invest in the character at the start. So if that's a good version of this, I would say I think this is a not good version of a mystery box story.
Yeah.
But like you said, if you love mystery box stories, you should check this one out, because your mileage may vary on that. Like, yeah, absolutely. If you're into just the genre of a thing, you can sometimes you'll take in the worst ones of it as well. Because like I watch pro wrestling, which I would say is not very good pro wrestling sometimes. But to the outsider, it all looks the same. to them. Like no one, if you're not interested, you don't know the difference between a good match and a bad match or whatever.
And whilst I maintain that Terry Pratchett's one of the greatest authors of all time, I am conscious of the fact that in terms of fantasy literature, he is absolutely at the populist end of it.
Yes.
And yet I will gladly, rather than do pretty much anything else, just sit and read a Pratchett novel.
And to be fair, there is an element of that whole stuff that appeals to everyone is normally more middle of the road stuff, isn't it? Like stuff that appeals to everyone is not necessarily loved, is less likely to be loved by an individual.
Yeah.
Whereas stuff that's kind of controversial or written to a level, there's a thing where if you're into genres of stuff and you read the same stuff over and over, not the same stuff over and over, but if you read a bunch of stuff from within a genre, the bang average stuff becomes boring to you. So you seek like the higher written stuff, the higher playing stuff.
Really interesting, because I've smashed through the Name of the Wind series, which I'd highly recommend to you if you were going to get into some fantasy reading, by Patrick Rothfuss, which is amazing. I read the Song of Ice and Fire series. And then just recently I went back and read The Fellowship of the Ring. So just the first third of The Lord of the Rings. I will go back and reread the second 2/3. And I was reading it and I was like, this is sublime. And it's so interesting that actually you can kind of go through and through and through with a genre and, you know, read iteration after iteration and different people building on this stuff. And I still look at the Lord of the Rings series and just go, fuck, this is sublimate. This is perfection. It's beautifully written, stunning, you know, everything about it is so gorgeous. And I have such a different relationship with comic books.
Yeah. Whereas I'm more, because I read so many comic books, I gravitate towards what I consider to be the best written ones, because when you read about, like, I like reading comics even if they're bad. Like, I like thinking about and debating bad ones.
I maintain that this process of doing this podcast has completely changed your critical eye.
Oh, absolutely. But then what it did is it just helped me articulate what I felt. I think that's the biggest thing about a critic of any kind is, like, there's a lot of media out there which is people just going, this was good, or this, I liked this, I thought this was cool, this was bad, I didn't like it.
Or the other thing that I see, which I think is even more egregious, is people just retelling a story.
Oh yeah. Well, the difference is, for me, is, well, like I keep mentioning, I listen to particular wrestling podcasts, and the ones that I listen to all the time are the ones who break down, here's why it's good, here's why it works, or here's why I think it works, and breaking down like the minutiae of everything, you know. And that's what I've been able, I think, from the podcast, been able to explain my own thoughts and feelings in a more articulate way. I
think we're both developing as critics, which is really interesting to watch as a process.
Which is the most pretentious thing that you could say, which I 100% agree with. Like, I'm on board, but yeah, that's...
And, you know, listening back to early episodes, the way that we think about and talk about comic books has changed. And for me, I think one of the things that has really shocked me and surprised me is that, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, when we started doing this, about a year and a half ago now, wasn't it?
Yeah, about.
I would have been really horny for this because the tone is serious and it's dry and it's sort of, you know...
slow building tension.
Yeah, it's a real...
burner.
It's a slow burner. But now the thing that excites me most about comic books is when I read something like Nightwing or Ultimate Spider-Man, which takes those well-worn comic book tropes, those superhero tropes, and plays with them in an interesting way. And it's one of those things that actually, I love a graphic novel. I love seeing a contained story, a limited story play out over 10 issues of a comic book. But there is a certain charm to the superhero stuff. And I think actually what really turned me on a couple of years ago in comics is seeing stuff outside of the norm. And now I'm sort of satiated with that through this process. And now I'm coming back around and being like, you know, that superhero shit's pretty fun.
Yeah. I think it's far more impressive when someone does something new and interesting with a worn genre like superheroes.
And again, if you know, the problem with this is now that we're seeing a lot of this type of story at the moment. We're seeing a lot of this normal people enter into an alternate dimension and weird stuff happens.
Mystery box stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's because... there is an expectation that comic books present us with high fantasy. And so that's a really convenient way of framing that. A mystery box is a convenient way of giving you fantasy but grounding it in the real world. But we've seen enough of it now in the medium that it's becoming stale.
Yeah. And do you know, I almost picked a different there's two other comics I was considering doing this week, other Eisner nominated comics.
Yeah.
One of them, which we might still do, the title is really cool and maybe it'll be better, I don't know, but it was a pretty similar plot to The Cull. Like a young person discovers new world, new dimension. And I picked this because I thought this was like thematically quite different to that.
Yeah.
And then it turns out it's kind of pretty much the same thing. It's just a different setting.
Thematically, it's been really similar, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And again, I think The Cull also had all these elements of coming of age.
Yes.
Because, you know, we were displayed with these post-adolescent kind of Hebio characters. Whereas this doesn't really have that. We're presented again with that kind of jaded, older, middle-aged man protagonist. I'm talking, you know, what's his fucking name from The Walking Dead?
Rick.
Yeah, Rick, or Matey from The Last of Us.
Yeah. Joel.
Joel from The Last of Us. To a certain extent, Old Man Logan.
Yeah.
To a certain degree, possibly like MCU Tony Stark, like late stage MCU Tony Stark. The kind of jaded old man, do you know what I mean? It's that protagonist that I'm really familiar with at the moment. Kratos in the later,
that's a good one, yeah.
Kratos in the later God of War games. You know, it's just
men with beards.
Yeah, older
men with beards.
Jaded older men with beards navigating a world they weren't really meant to be in, and it just feels a bit stale.
Yeah. It's again, but here's the thing: as we've just said with superheroes. Tropes can be old and worn and stuff. It just means the bar is higher for you to do something new and interesting, and this just doesn't do anything new and interesting with it.
No.
It takes a kind of old trope that normally works of like, what's going on? But it then just doesn't give anything else. And that's what I mean. That's what I said earlier. It's well written, but it's just uninspired. And I think if I was a critic doing like a writing a review or making a video ever, I think that would be like my, Phantom Road. Well written, but uninspired. My pretentious critic.
I quite like the way I summed it up, actually.
How did you sum it up?
I can't remember the exact words I said.
But
at least 3 times during the episode, you've said, you put that really well, Jamie, so I must have done quite a good job.
Yes. I mean, you read it and you successfully articulated thoughts about it, which resonated with myself as well. So
well done.
Good
Thank
job
you.
on that.
That was lovely.
Got some last notes, which, again, little parts which were good, which I thought were just worth mentioning. One was that I always wanted to get in somewhere, but it never kind of matched anything else we talked about.
Well, that's what you do at the end, is you shoehorn in everything that you wanted to say.
I liked the opening page being a bit from later in the story.
Yes. Yeah.
When it first happened, I thought, oh, here we go, because that's a common thing to do in issue 1.
Yeah.
But when it then did in issue 2, and I went, oh, okay, we're doing it with every issue. That's interesting. I haven't seen that before. And then issue 3 was the best example of it. Going forward, and would be repeated going forward, is when it would show something, and then in issue 3 it opens with someone in a balaclava in someone's hotel room, and then as it goes on, the FBI agent is in the hotel room getting ready to get in the shower. So immediately that bit shown at the beginning creates tension, much like Alfred Hitchcock's "There's a bomb under the table," like creating tension. So as soon as we got to that point, I went, "That's clever. That's like really good work on there." The guy we do the thing where we sometimes just give a character a different name. Yeah. I had made the note of like the Hawaiian shirt guy I was going to call Richard Nixon because he looks like Richard Nixon.
He does look a bit like Nixon, doesn't he?
For some reason.
I'm not a crook.
I was the Futurama one.
That's a fairly similar impersonation to the one I just did.
I'm trying to remember I said, nobody can be elected twice, but I've got a new body, and it's Bender's body.
Yeah.
There was a quite convenient part where, so the egg that they're carrying turns out to be a baby monster of the things that they're, and the baby has powers or something.
Which, again, struck me as a bit of an anticlimax because we see so many of them.
Yeah, I thought the feeling is meant to be like, oh, it's a baby version of them. That's weird.
It's a baby version of them, but we see so many of them. Are we to believe that every single one of them needed to be transported like this?
No, I got the feeling that it was a very unique version.
Well, absolutely, because it's the only one that we've seen
that and
given this treatment.
And it has powers.
Yeah.
Very, again, Stranger Things, kind of Baby Yoda from Mandalorian, like that, like, very tropey. Like this was, you remember we read something before, Void Rivals.
Yes.
And I was like, I recognize that trope. I recognize that trope. This is kind of that. There's a lot less. There's a lot more originality in between them. Like literally long stretches of road.
Well done. That was a very good pun. There are fewer tropes, and they are more subtly kind of woven into the text. But I agree with you, it's tropey.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I like tropey stuff.
Just have to have some substance in there as well.
I just need to see some richness in the characters. That's all I need to invest me in something.
I don't mind a bit of processed food in my diet, but you need a little bit of fruit and veg in there just so you don't go constipated.
Yeah, you need some fiber so you can shit it out at the end of the day, don't you?
And good character is the fiber of comic books.
Absolutely. We'll clear
what we're saying. That's a t-shirt.
That's the Spotify advert.
And as you know, characterization is the fiber of comic books. Don't get constipated. Listen to the comic lyric. Yeah, it works.
That's so bad. We need to workshop
that.
Not professionally yet.
I mean, I get paid. I'm not this. I do voiceover professionally.
Oh, God, you do as well, don't you?
I was going to say about the baby.
So if you would like to hire Ryan to do some voiceover work, like a cameo-style thing where you can pay Ryan from the podcast to say whatever you want.
Yes. Write in with an email to comiclyric@gmail.com and maybe I'll say a thing for you.
And if you want to hire me to do it with no professional experience in voiceover work, I will come to Ryan's and be like, bro, I need to use your setup.
Yes. You need to get in my recording cupboard.
The recording cupboard?
Which has been renovated now, so it's working a lot better.
Renovating the recording cupboard.
So the part of the baby monster with magic.
Yes, sorry.
The convenient thing that it does is that it shows the main characters each other's traumatic past. Yeah. And I thought that was a really basic way of being like, and now the characters understand each other.
Give us a go on your tragic backstory.
Yeah, literally. But the baby literally is like, right, you are going to see their tragic backstory, and I'm going to show you their tragic backstory. But it's
like, here we have two anti-heroes with tragic backstories.
Yeah.
How much more paint by numbers could you get in the 21st century?
But the paint by numbers, I think this even got worse than that, because this, again, was just about like, oh no, the magic in the universe has revealed this past to each other. Like,
yes.
Yeah, that was a bit kind of like, did we even need to do that? And they were so close to just telling each other. Like they inferred a lot to each other and still do want to talk about it in that very tropey way.
Yeah.
And I was fine with that. And then when the baby was like, I'm gonna speed up this character relationship, these character arcs, like, why? Like, does the baby know we're in a comic?
We've dedicated way too much page space to character realizations here. We should probably speed this up.
Yes. And also, you know what I'm like with, I don't know if you notice this part of you know what I'm like with poorly named things in comics. So like in She-Hulk, they had the group of them had Punch Club.
Yeah.
I was like, that's dumb. In this, there's a character who does the classic, he's injured and dies in the FBI's bathtub.
Yeah.
And she's like her old partner, and she's like, oh my God, Agent Pike, what's happening? And he goes, they're coming. And she's like, who is and he goes, the horror men.
Yeah.
And I went, that sucks. Yeah. That's horrifically bad.
I caught that. I mean, to be honest with you, that was about as far as I read, mate.
If I wasn't reading for this, I would have put it down then.
Yeah.
I would have just been like, nope.
I was reading it for this, and I did put it down then. I went, that's enough of that.
Yep, that's bad.
I'm going to make dinner instead.
I tell you what, I thought, just in kind of comparison to like bad writing, like I started a comic that was really bad that I put down before I even finished the first issue, right? It was a Blade comic. So Blade, you know Blade.
I'm aware. I'm familiar with Blade, yes. I'm a human being that exists and owns a television. The Blade film they're trying to do for the MCU is going really badly right now. They just lost another director. Really?
Yeah. And the most common response that people were putting, they announced in 2019.
Pre-pandemic.
Yeah, if I get the pronunciation right, can't even pronounce pronunciation, Mahershala Ali is playing Blade, and he was announced like 2019, and they still haven't got a director locked down or a script. The most common response everyone was posting to that I saw online was, some motherfuckers just keep trying to ski uphill. I think that I probably got that. I you know when you think you've got a quote in your head and you don't deliver it correctly, and now I feel an onus to actually get it correctly.
Well, yeah, let's take. I mean, to be honest with you, we need to fill some space. This has been a short episode.
Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill.
Hey,
that's the
there
one.
You
but
go.
that to like dropping their third director and just being like, that's just such a great response. But yeah, I was reading a Blade comic and it was written really badly because in a conversation early on, Blades found this woman he was looking for, and then it cuts back to him being kind of hired by someone to find the woman. And this guy who's hired is a werewolf, not in werewolf form, and he's like, yeah, there's something about her, some kind of old magic thing that we don't know what it is yet, but we need to find her. And immediately I'm like, that's the biggest trope of them all in Fantastic. There's a chosen one, and we don't know why yet. And then he goes, oh yeah, why do you need me to find her then? And the werewolf's like, yeah, there's some deep, the old evil is looking for her as well. And I was like, Jesus Christ, like, you're just fucking laying it out, playing on the page here.
Yeah.
Like, and then it literally got to a point where he's fighting, meets this old evil, and he goes, yes, Blade, I'm aware that you're the only one that could kill me. And I went, what the fuck is this? Like, this is a nosedive for Marvel. Like, Jesus Christ.
As a side note, this is my problem with, I've noticed something being on dating apps.
Right.
Which is the sheer amount of Harry Potter adults in our age range.
Oh, absolutely.
Like the sort of 30 to 40-year-olds love the Harry Potter. And I cannot get past how hokey it all is. The Mirror of Erised, the Death Eaters, it's all just so shitty.
Yeah, but if it's meant for kids, then that's the debate now, isn't it? It's like, is it meant for kids? Does that excuse bad writing or not?
The problem with the Harry Potter series, and J.K. Rowling did a thing, she did a very distinct thing, which is that you are absolutely right. The Philosopher's Stone, Your American, the Sorcerer's Stone, and the Chamber of Secrets were quite distinctly written for children.
Yeah.
But as she was writing, it took her, a decade or so to get through them all. She started writing them for the original audience, as in the children that were 5 or 6 being read them by their parents.
Yeah.
By the time those children were like 15, 16, she wrote the last books for them, right? Because those kids had grown up with them and, it was a decade of them reading them. And so she wanted them to enjoy them. And so the Deathly Hallows has quite adult themes.
Yeah.
The problem is that it means that you have to meter them out and read them throughout your entire childhood for them to hit right. Because if you're a parent now reading the Harry Potter books to your kids, it's not going to take you 10 years. It's probably going to take you about 6 months to a year to read all of them, in a half an hour, 20 minutes a day, 7 days a week. You're probably going to smash through them about one a month. And so, yes, you are right. Those first 2 books absolutely are written for children. But by the end, it's young adult fiction. Like there's quite heavy themes of sex and sexuality and, and so what she's done there is she made it a phenomenon for one generation, but it means the tone isn't congruent throughout. The tone is really incongruent novel to novel because they slowly transition from being children's books to young adult fiction, which means that as a child now being read the Harry Potter books, the later ones are raunchy as fuck in places.
To play devil's advocate, and I'm rare and loath to defend anything J.K. Rowling related for obvious reasons, because she's fucking crazy now. But the one where you could look at it is congruent with the perspective of the main character. Yes,
and you are right. And that
whether that's intentional or not, that's another discussion.
Well, and that's an interesting point, but I think the series as a whole suffers for that reason, because it's a series that has a huge tonal shift throughout. And it means that it's not for any one audience, it's for a bunch of different audiences at different points in their lives, which to me just doesn't, it makes it meant that it was able to be a huge phenomenon at the time, but it kind of makes it suffer as a series in terms of its longevity thereafter.
I think it's one of those things where the thing that gives it more longevity is just the fact that it has some decent world building. And by decent, I just mean like it starts off a bit and then meters it a bit out at a time, and you can slowly be exposed to this world.
It's
whether
fine,
it's written well,
but there are way better Wizard School novels floating about for young adults at the moment.
now inspired by.
And to be honest with you, at the point where the Harry Potter books were getting huge, because I never read them as a child. I read them as a university student who was about to do a writing for children module at uni.
Right.
So I was in the Manchester Writing School. I was about to do a module where I had to learn how to write for children, basically. And so over the summer, I read a shitload of children's fiction. And the Harry Potter books were the worst thing that I read.
Right. Fair.
By far. And it's bothered me for years that they're held in such high esteem. Bear in mind, I've read all the books. I've not seen any of them. I think I've maybe seen the first 2 films.
Yeah, separate thing though, isn't it?
Beyond that, I don't really have... And I'm sure the films are probably have a bit more of a congruent tone because they were making them retroactively. Although they'd started making the films before the books were out, hadn't they?
Yeah, I think so. So there's an element to what you say there as well. But then the problem there is the first one is very much a kid's film because it's starring kids. And then it's more young adult because it's starring young adults.
Yeah,
so
totally.
The theme does change in line with the main characters again.
But no, when I see adults who, and again, I'm so guilty of this, and I complain about it, where I'm like, you've gotten into your 30s, and the thing that you still care about and love is Harry Potter. I say that as a dedicated Pokemon nerd.
Yeah.
Like, I fucking love me some Pokemon.
This is what you have to have, the humility of the non-toxic wrestling fan.
Yeah, totally.
When you're a wrestling fan, it's like, you cannot criticize. There's very little other, hobbies and interests that you can criticize, like Morris dancing, I think, is one of the few that you could, like, wrestling fans could look down on. You'd be like, that's pretty lame.
Although, I personally, for me, Pokemon is quite a private thing, and I just nuzlocke Pokemon games, and I found a way that it kind of fits into my life and I just enjoy it.
And you collect the cards?
A little bit, not so much anymore. I've really petered off with that.
So it really was a phase, like your parents said.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I'm sorry, Mum, it was a phase.
Well, like I said earlier, it's that thing about the stuff that appeals to the most people is normally the most watered down basic stuff.
Yeah.
Because for something like with flavor, like taste and flavor,
it needs to hit the lowest common denominator.
Yeah, everyone loves bread because bread is great. Bread is great, but it's pretty basic.
Yeah.
Like, so in that way, Harry Potter's like bread. Like, it's fine. There's a little bit to it, and it's enough that everyone likes it, but it's not overly complex. So it puts everyone off.
But you need some meat to make it a sandwich.
Well, that's where we talk about. Like, we put the meat. That's why we're looking for the meat in the comics.
Yeah.
And the fruit and the veg that stop you going constipated. That's the mantra of the podcast.
For the listeners that are still left, I'm sorry I went on a rant about Harry Potter.
Oh, they left before you started.
Yeah, they were gone ages ago. They looked at the time codes on Spotify and went, that's where the content stops.
Do you want me to put a time code? Jamie's Harry Potter rant starts here.
Yeah, do.
Okay. Well, I will do.
So thank you for listening.
Might make the best of at the end of the year.
You never know.
You never know.
Thank you for listening, guys. I've had a lot of fun on this episode. Today's been a good day. If you'd like to send us an email, you can do comicglitter@gmail.com. If you want to watch some shorts, we put them on YouTube. We put them on TikTok. If you want to leave us a review, be as rude as you can, but make it 5 stars. Have a wonderful day and good night.
Great call to action. 5-star. My review for your call to action was 5-star.
Yeah?
Yeah. And
do you think?
Yeah, and I don't even have to say anything mean to you about it.
We've fallen into a pattern whereby you do the intro and I do the call to action.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm going to be honest with you, I fucking hate calls to action. Like, do you not find it really turns you off in the content you listen to?
No, because it depends if you personalize it or not. Like, that's the difference, isn't it? When it is just a very much like a review,
like, comment, subscribe.
Yeah, exactly. So
we do need about 20 more YouTube subs, though.
Yeah, 50, I think.
We need 50 YouTube subs.
Yes.
Just to hit a little personal milestone of mine. So if you could do that, if you could go to YouTube, which probably isn't where you consume this content, and subscribe.
Maybe it'll be a certain MCU film coming out soon than the review that might get us over that finish line.
You never know. We've got a whole month of something special.
Depending, me too now with the Eisner stuff, like when we stop the Eisner stuff and when we start doing the special stuff.
I think we need to just jump into the special stuff, bro.
What, as of July?
Yeah. You heard it here first, guys. July's going to be special. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.